Hello and welcome to this very special episode, first episode of the Leadership Lounge. New people to this podcast might wonder why I'm saying it like that, or my regular listeners will know exactly what I'm talking about. But we've leveled up the podcast. We are now called the Leadership Lounge. Previously, #leadership, what's on your mind? We've had a little break in between. I'm going to come to that in a second. The aim of the podcast, as ever, is to add value to your leadership journey by speaking to amazing people with amazing stories and experts in their field. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. You'll be able to see us. Or you're listening to us on your podcast provider. Make sure you follow us. And as ever, I always ask to give your points of view and your thoughts on each of our guests that we have. We're now, as a business, TDL, you'll see some references to the brand, and all our guest information will be in the notes below. And I've been firmly sat, as Katie, our guest today, sits very patiently. I want to tell you this little story about perfectionist mindset. We've had a month off. It wasn't meant to be this long, and I've been trying to get everything perfect. So it's not perfect, as we know. But you'll see some iterations of the podcast as we go forwards. But we've got so many people to interview, I just had to get started. So with that said, Katie, how are you doing?
I am really good, and thank you very much for inviting me onto the podcast in such a momentous episode as well.
I know, the first one of the this is episode 125 for the people who are new to the podcast. So there's plenty there for you to go and have a look at. There's a lot of veteran playlists and a lot of different things for people. So you go back and check them all out. But start on and put the best foot forward, I think they say, isn't it? So before
Yeah.
we hear from you, can you resonate with perfectionist mindset? Have you been there before?
Well, yeah, most definitely, and very much particularly in my early career. And so, a large part of my career has been unlearning perfectionism. And how do you do that? So sometimes perfectionism is good because you're managing risk, because you're managing big outcomes. So a little attention to detail and what have you is really important. But when you get into more senior leadership roles, the noticing you have to do is quite different. And it's not about perfection.
Yes, exactly. So Katie, we've not introduced you yet. And for people who don't know who you are, can you please give us a little bit of a flavour about who you are,
Yeah.
what your background is, and what you do now?
Certainly. So right now, I'll start with where I am now and go back with it.
Perfect.
So I'm the founder and director of a company called Yellowrattle Coaching. And the reason I named it after the plant Yellowrattle is that that plant is put to soil when other plants can't grow. So leaders who want to have a diverse culture and allow very different people to them to flourish under their leadership is who I'd like to work with. So that's where I started. That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I was hoping if you hadn't explained that, because I remember when we first met online, I think it was,
Yep.
you explained that, and I loved that analogy, and I like to hear the reason why behind lots of
Yeah.
different things. So that's brilliant. I love that.
Well, and the thing is, it comes from my own career path. So I started in engineering. So started with a maths background and started with a very process and governance background, but found that I was being drawn to a more creative mindset. And when we talk about perfectionist mindset, I assumed you had to be a perfectionist at engineering, and if I wanted to do arts, I had to be a perfectionist at arts. So I did a degree in engineering, and I was in the Air Force as an engineer, and then I went back to university to do international relations and to find a different way of thinking, of course, one extreme to the other. But the magic of it was when I brought them both together. So when you have a mindset that can look at process governance, risk management, and a more creative mindset, what's the combination that we can bring? Because throughout history, and we've actually gone from one way to the other. So if we look at like the Renaissance, which was really, really arty, and we look at the Industrial Revolution, which was much more about science, we do this all the way through history. And for the challenges that we have now and what leaders are going to face in the future about climate change, about AI, you need to bring both of these sets of thinking together. And so that was where I thought in the last 18 months, I went, how can I bring both these things together? Which is why I created Yellowrattle. And I've led in both spheres. So I know the challenges and opportunities both bring.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to pick up on that. I said to you before, I really want a theme of like the future leader in this, and talk about what the challenges and what the opportunities are moving forward for people. But tell us a little bit about your Air Force career then. What was your sort of what led you to the Air Force, and then what did you do during the Air Force?
Well, it's a story about seeking structure. So I had a really fantastic childhood, and then a big event happened in my childhood, which I needed structure to help me get through it. And I joined the Air Cadets. And the Air Cadets provided camaraderie, they provided learning, they provided the things the textbook tells you how to get through tough times. I didn't know that at the time, but intuitively, my attitude changed, my confidence changed, and my self-belief got a lot stronger. And I kind of hoped that the Air Force would just be the same. And so when they offered me a scholarship to go to university to study engineering, well, great. So
Win-win.
that's what I did. Win-win, right? So that's what I did. Now, my career in the Air Force was not a typical one. Um, I was very much drawn to what was happening in the world. Probably my first indication that I loved the creative side and the very contemporary connection to the rest of the world. So I volunteered to do a number of roles which were what we call out of branch, so not engineering roles. So I did half my career as an engineer, and I did policy and governance and things like that. But I did also half of it doing other things. So I went to Afghanistan with 3 Commando Royal Marines as part of their female engagement team. And I did a lot of stuff about information and how do we help people who are in crisis and humanitarian crisis. So again, a real mix, and I did that for 10 years.
Amazing. And again, I'm just thinking, and I hope the audience are, about the wealth of experience and knowledge that you've picked up along that way as well, because some of the skill sets, and I sometimes say that you don't realize what the Air Force and the military gives you until you leave and you realize the skill sets that you have and the ability to adapt and change. So have you experienced that coming out now?
Very, very true. So I left the military in 2015. So 2014, I got my first job in 2015. And I think there's an interesting aspect about the military where you are working as part of a bigger system. So the way that you fit into the system is what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And so your own professional development, your own capabilities tend not to feature right at the front of your mind, and more, what is my contribution to this outcome or to this mission? And then when you leave the military, actually, you have to learn to look at your own capability and your own impact that you can have as an individual. And that was really weird for me to go when in job interviews and what have you. But what did you contribute? What did I contribute? But it was not about me. It's about the team, And so this was a new mindset that I had to try and adapt to, that actually owning my own my agency, in fact, was now down to me. What was I going to do? What were my new boundaries? What were the areas I wanted to work in? How would I actually carve my own path? And all of these were very, very new mindsets for me. And to be honest, I find it hard to shift into that mindset. But the military teaching me sort of an adaptive mindset, about growth mindset, meant that I was able to adjust, but it took time. But I was able to use
Yeah.
that mindset I've been taught, that resilience, to learn new ways of being.
I like that, because that matches one of our things that we're really working on at the minute, is that empower self. And a couple of
Yeah.
things that I've spoken on recently is, and early last year, is about the relationship we have with selfishness, of like you don't, almost, you back away from being selfish because it's not a good thing, but you need to be selfish in a good way to empower yourself forwards and to learn and develop, and
Yeah.
that has a big effect on others around you as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a really important aspect, and especially for leaders, which is the word selfish comes to mind for people, but actually it's about needs. And so you need to be able to address your own needs in order to address those of your team. And in sometimes we're nurtured not to address our own needs. So our body will tell us when we're hungry. Our body will tell us that we need to cough, and we cough, and that's it. We don't try and, well, sometimes maybe on a podcast recording we try not to cough, but
I'm
you know,
really
we
trying
will.
now. I'm really, now you've said that, I'm really
Yeah,
trying. Go on.
we will naturally we'll try and do it, but in the way that a lot of people are brought up, they're nurtured if they feel something that it's not required, it's not to be met right now. And so they either push the emotions back down, and then they address them later, which is healthy, but sometimes they don't. And if you don't address your needs, they come out in other ways. And that's the difficulty, especially if you're under pressure. And so that whole selfish mindset, that selfish, I need to look after myself. Well, no, it's not selfish. It's really, really not, because you're going to look after yourself so that you can look after others.
I love that. It's such a thing. I think we were talking about the evolution and the waves of leadership. I think that is becoming more prevalent now more than ever, because it's accepted in society. It's almost it's accepted that it is a need, it's a requirement, isn't it, as part of the jigsaw of leadership, as I call it sometimes. I want to pick up on one thing that you mentioned earlier on about ATC, Air Training Corps, and the early days, and then leading on to the RAF. You said the word communities, and I'm sort of linking, and I'd love to know your perspective and thoughts and experience on this, about leadership sometimes becomes a bit lonely, and people get those job titles, those roles of leadership. We're definitely doing it as a company, building leadership and having community elements to sharing best practice, asking for help, support, nurturing leadership. That's a big part of the future leader, isn't it? Having those communities and like-minded people. What's been your experience of that?
Absolutely. And one of the things, so I'm involved in another leadership program with a company that uses the research that that they've developed, but also the ones that I'm studying in my analytical psychology. And I think what they've got is very powerful. And one of the things that they have is an alumni a group, because it doesn't end at the course. And one of the most important things, especially that these groups can be important for, is in transition space. So if you're transitioning to a new role, if you're transitioning to a new strategy, anything at all that requires that change in it's that space in between. So people who come together are not part of the old job or not part of the new job. They just have similar experiences. And that's the space that allows you to say, is this just me? Does everyone find this hard? And having those community spaces are so important. And then you all go back to your own jobs. And so you're not sharing IP, you're not revealing anything that your company doesn't want you to reveal. It's just about your lived experience of leadership. And that's the spaces that make the difference for people.
Yeah. And again, I think you explaining it that way. I sometimes say when I'm delivering any workshops, and I think it links into exactly what you just said. I say that the almost 50% of the value of people coming together in digital or face to face is the fact that those people are together.
Yeah.
Shared experiences. Oh, you've got that. I've had that problem before. I can foresee I'm going to have that issue. Just being together, communicating and sharing. You don't realize how much is in the room, even when you're deemed the expert or you're deemed the speaker or the facilitator. There's so much in the room that. Have you had that experience when you're there to set up the environment and it's almost like you sit back and just let it flow? Because I always say I feel a bit lazy because I've not done anything. All I've done is set the scene, asked a question, and off they go. And an hour's gone by and they go, that was great.
But that's it. But that's the magic. That's the creation of the space that allows people to talk. And it can be as a facilitator in a group or even coaching. The acronym that I was taught in my training was wait. Why am I talking?
I
And
love that.
so that's the thing. And I have there's there's apps that I have which record. No, they don't record. They listen to noise, and so they don't record anything. But they say at the end of the meeting, you spoke 28%, or whatever. So it's a really useful indicator. And it just picks up decibels. So from the mic if you're talking. But I find it very, very helpful because it is all about this creating the space to allow others to talk.
I like that. I like that. I have not heard of that, but remind me what that app's called again. What's the technology?
So the app is Crisp, spelled with a K, and
Right.
what it does is it cancels background noise.
Yeah.
So if you're in a cafe or anything like that, it cancels all that noise out. But at the end of the call, it says you spoke for 28% or whatever. But it doesn't record anybody.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's just the decibel noise.
I like that. Again, good use of digital tools as well to give
Yeah.
you that. When we were talking before we came on as well, I was putting it under the bracket that I always do, that self and situational awareness. How aware are you? Because that gives you so much power to change, to make choices, to implement your environment. So we're almost coming up 5 minutes to go. It flies by. I love having these great
Yeah.
conversations. Tell me your thoughts on the future leaders. We said about the evolution, the way the dips, the industrial revolution. We've definitely talked about the shift of leadership through the pandemic. Look forward. What do you think are the challenges? What do you think people need to do to be a future leader?
So the number one thing is know yourself. That's the most important thing that anyone can do, but it really comes to light in a leadership role. So know what it is you like, but also know what you don't like, and notice why. Because it's not a bad thing that you don't like something. It's your body and your mind telling you that this, for some reason, is a threat. And so you need to know why. And you might be able to find out that it's not a threat. And so your ability to be present is so important. So that's the number one thing, is know yourself and know how you come across to others with it. The second thing I would say for future leaders is you're going to be leading out of structure in the future. So you might not have employees. You might just have people who've come together for a project. You might be in multiple countries. You might have all sorts of things. So the structural reform might not come as we think it will. And so what it is when we have the structure, how do we help people work in the system? So rather than the structure, the system itself. And so that's where we start to look at nuance. We start to see more than literally what's in front of us. And so a big part of that for leaders is a concept called mentalization, which is, can I empathize with you? But also, can I see the bigger picture as well? So can I then ask the right questions? So it's the ability to empathize with people, but also understand the bigger picture, and the structures we're used to won't be able to help us as much as we're used to them.
Amazing. And the simplicity, but also the complexity of where my mind was going when you were talking then is great, because again, it's so true. And whether people resonate with that right now, it might be something that people might rewind and listen to again. That's how well it was put across. So well done you. But so I've got two questions. One is, I was almost going to say, why do you love doing what you do? But what gets you, ignites your fire in what you currently do in the coaching world?
So I coach people who are shaping the future, and humans for forever and in the future always need a positive future. They need to know that you're working hard for your children, or you're working hard for a better future. That's always been our motivator. So when I'm working with people who are shaping the future, the people who I work with range from tech founders to civil servants, to people working in our very important institutions that keep our country going. And every single one of them is shaping the future, because who they talk to, it influences their perception of life. So when I coach teachers, how they perceive themselves and how they perceive the future will go to the children in the schools. And if you're looking at tech, when founders are wanting to look at, well, what do I need to think about? And we talk about different aspects of their technology. We're creating an inclusive future. We're creating an exciting future. And the people who want to create that inclusive culture want to work with me. And so when I see the diversity of people coming, it builds like enormous enthusiasm about what's coming around the corner. Because if it was just my my bubble of the people I worked with, I'd have no worries. I think the future looks great. But I need to encourage even wider people to come and work with me. But it's one of those things where the real magic of being human for me is that the ability to connect to other humans. That's our gift as humans. And we can connect to animals, we can connect to other humans. We have a range of ways that we can connect, and to have that time with people who are shaping the future, I feel very privileged to do it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I totally get that. It's a really good, and again, I'm just thinking of questioning and coaching somebody around that doesn't potentially, or is on the starting journey or of their leadership. It just makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Because you do have such an impact on the people around you, that I love it when people don't realize the impact they have and the transformation that can have. Just the last 30 seconds, how do you develop and learn, and what's on the horizon for you? You mentioned about studying. What are you currently doing, pushing yourself forwards?
Well, two lines. So my big hypothesis is that the world of work is not very well, and we need to treat it like a system that needs to get better. So 2 lines of study I'm doing. One is I work with the British Jungian Analytic Association, which is the work of Carl Jung, and how we bring that to life for leaders. And that's about your journey to integration, becoming whole and knowing your whole character and how that comes out as a leader. And the other side I'm doing is I'm very lucky as a veteran to have got a scholarship through Heropreneurs to study at Warwick, and I'm doing their Masters of Business Administration. So getting all of the modules there, and all of the work over here, and building it into my value propositions when I'm working with leaders.
Brilliant. So you're going to be busy moving forwards. Future leadership is okay. So, Katie, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, being the first episode of the Leadership Lounge. I'm so excited to be even recording this episode, and I'm so pleased it went so well. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about it, your perspective as well, and it reminded me how much I get from each and every episode and every guest that I have. I do see it as a privilege to have this, to be able to spend time with people. So who knows, we might be seeing more of you. And on that note as well, I will say to the audience that we are going to be hosting panel discussions about certain topics, which allows me to bring some previous guests that have been on the podcast into the new era of the podcast. So look out for stuff on our social media. Make sure you check out Katie's links in the comments below. Make sure you check out TDL. There's some exciting things coming out very soon. 2023 is deemed to be a very exciting year for all of us. And thank you so much for joining us on the first episode, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you again. See you soon. Bye.